Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Milton School Committee meeting for February 26, 2025. We'll call this meeting to order. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge a shocking tragedy in our community. We're all aware of the passing over this weekend of Isabella Care-Louis, a 5th grade student at Tucker School. And our thoughts are with her family and friends and loved ones at this shoot, sorry about that. I'll start over. I called our meeting to order for February 26, 2025 for the Milton School Committee and was beginning by acknowledging the tragic loss of Isabella Pierre-Louis, a 5th grade student at Tucker School, over this past weekend. So our thoughts and prayers are with Bella's family, friends, the Tucker community, and the entire Milton community, and everyone who loved her. And I would personally just like to thank the way the community is coming together to support us at this time. I'd like to just acknowledge a moment of silence in Bella's honor. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. So before we officially approve our agenda for this evening, we will now do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you. So as we look over our agenda in order to approve it, does anybody have any changes to the items that we have here?
Can we reorganize my report to have Karen Cahill go before?
Yes. Thank you for that. Yep, absolutely. Mrs. Cahill needs to get to the hockey game. So yeah, not quite yet, but Dr. Burrows has your back and we're gonna move you up.
Thank you.
Any other changes? Okay, so first on our agenda will be public comment. We have this portion of our meeting each time to hear from members of our community. As they want to share their points of view with us. We have up to 15 minutes for this. We ask residents to keep their comments to 3 minutes. We do not respond directly to public comment. If concerns or questions that are raised pertain to items that are on our agenda, members may be able to respond in the course of a conversation that may be relevant going forward. And just as we've been sort of working to remind ourselves, we're interested in having just respectful dialogue, even when we're engaged, as we know we are, in many challenging topics at this time. So with that, if you are attending online and hoping to participate in public comment, can you please raise your hand at this time, just so we have a sense of how many folks are hoping to speak? We have at least one speaker in person. Okay, I don't see any hands raised online. That's fine, you'll have another chance. If we can start with who's joining us in person, if you can just come forward and introduce yourselves, please. Yourself or yourselves. Yep, okay.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jill Clark. I live at 26 Harold Street. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 4 and the parent of a Pierce 8th grader. I want to really thank you for the transparency and information about the budget that has appeared on the website over the past week or two. It's incredibly helpful to see all of that information and to really have the detailed thinking behind what is needed and what a no override budget would look like. I can really only engage with the devastation of a no override budget kind of piece by piece. And so I want to focus on a really small piece of it today, but I want to make sure that no one misinterprets these comments as missing the big picture of the devastation that would be caused across the schools for all of the positions that would need to be cut in a no override budget. But what I particularly want to talk about today is the impact on school nursing. I understand on the list of positions that would be cut under a no override position that there would be 1.8 FTEs of school nurses that would be cut in addition to the director of nursing. Many schools found out how valuable their director of nursing positions were during the COVID pandemic. Nurses did so much during COVID, and a lot of people learned for the first time that school nursing was not just ice packs and Band-Aids. School nurses allow kids to attend school safely. They keep kids in school and able to learn. And for many kids with special health care needs, they are the reason that kids are able to attend school with their peers. In particular, I want to call attention to one of the roles of the director of nursing is to run the medication administration program in schools. So the school nurse is responsible, her license is literally on the line, for the ability of medications to be stored, administered, and delegated in schools. So nurses anywhere, one of their main responsibilities is the administration of medication. There are certain circumstances in Massachusetts where nurses can delegate their authority to administer medications to other people who are not nurses, and schools are one of the few places in Massachusetts where that can happen. So if you have a director of nursing who is willing to organize that program, you can have kids with severe food allergies whose teachers can carry EpiPens and be available to provide that EpiPen in the case that they have an anaphylactic reaction. You can have students with type 1 diabetes who can attend school safely even if they have a hypoglycemic emergency. You can have kids with seizure disorders who can be on the bus, make it to school, and be in school safely. If we don't have medication administration, only the nurse can do those things, and there just aren't enough nurses to go around. And in particular, if you're cutting another 1.8 FTEs of nursing, it will really impact the ability of kids to attend school safely and make it difficult for all kids to attend. So I just thank you. I want to wrap up by saying if we are in an override position, I strongly encourage you to reconsider cutting those positions from the budget. But more importantly, for all of you and for everyone that's listening, I hope that we are not in a no override position and we don't have to consider these cuts. And I will be doing everything I can to make sure that there's an override, and hope everyone that's listening will as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would anyone who is online care to participate in public comment at this time? If so, can you raise your hand? Okay, I do not see any hands raised online. Would anyone else in the audience here like to participate? Okay. All right, so thank you very much. And with that, we will conclude the public comment portion of our agenda, so we can segue to the superintendent's report.
Great. Thank you. Really, the last few weeks, wellness was break, and we've pretty much been. We're not being very good tonight, are we?
Sorry. Everybody double check. Is your mic on? Hello?
So since we last met, I think we've been, our kind of sole focus has been on budget development. The thing I wanted to mention in my report prior to getting into discussing some of that budget work is just kind of echoing what Lizzie shared regarding the tragedy that we've all been processing over the last number of days with Bella I just want to thank so many people at Tucker and throughout the district. From the moment we heard that this had happened, people reached out from every corner of Milton, and continues day by day to provide support for adults, students, family. There's all sorts of fundraising going on, and it's I think for a lot of people there just haven't been words. It's such an unthinkable thing and such a hard thing, and this week I think for everyone throughout Milton has felt different, and you kind of go through waves, and I've just been so impressed by Principal Hogue at Tucker, and Caroline, her assistant principal. Jenny Beliveau has been a huge resource. She spent a lot of time over at Tucker and connecting to resources throughout Boston to provide supports for students and for staff. And that continues to go on. So I just want to echo what you shared, and grateful that we have a community where I think Tucker is a special community too, where people come together and really kind of lean on each other. And there's, at a time like this, that's what we really need. So wanted to start with that. And I also, secondly, wanted to invite Karen Cahill up, our principal, to discuss the MHS Program of Studies. School committee members, you received this in our last meeting. The expert is here to answer questions, and for both of us to kind of talk about kind of where this is and where we see this going in the years ahead.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that. Milton gear. Milton girls hockey playing tonight over at Ullin. So just from here, I'm going to the hockey game. I appreciate you putting me at the top of the agenda so we can support our student athletes. And thank you for having me this evening. So I watched the meeting in February. I rewatched it over vacation. Yes, I did. And just to be sure, there's a few things that I know, bigger picture, that we want to talk about, but at the same time, the present, what do we need to look at tonight to approve the program of studies? There's bigger conversations in regards to programming, how the course selection process is done, which I did review last year as well. I'm happy to have that conversation. But to be respectful of your time and all of your agenda items, I'm happy to touch upon just what needs to be done tonight and then continue those conversations at another time, if that's what works for everyone, but I'm open to whatever you all would like to know. As far as the program of studies, Chair Carroll, you had questions in regards to the community service requirements, and I'm hoping since the last meeting everyone has been given access to the documents. In watching that meeting, Member Loring, you had actually requested during the meeting, so I had done that during the meeting. So I'm hoping everyone has been able to see the comparable data from other districts, and where Milton High stands. We're currently at 140 hours, and I think the closest district was actually 60 hours, and that's over the course of 4 years. And my recommendation is for it to go to 15 hours per year for our students, which makes it 60 hours over the course of their 4 years. I have reasoning that I'm happy to explain from a staffing perspective and a student perspective on why I feel that is in the best interest of our student body, and I'm happy to say all of that or answer questions or however you'd like to proceed.
I think it would be really helpful to look at the competency determination.
Sure.
I think that's a key part of this. It's something that I've talked about here with the school committee. So you'll all remember this is the ballot 2.
Yes. Yep.
That was on my list as well, so I was just going to have the bullet points of the community service, competency determination, and then the new courses. Those were the 3 items that we really need to look at. So if you want to start with competency, the CD, we can do that first and then go back to community service, or?
Well, I mean, since you started with community service, since I know I had raised the questions about that,
Sure.
I think it's helpful to have the context. I think I was just, curious. Essentially what you've provided, which is how we did compare and how this change would potentially relate to that. But I understand, that it's helpful to consider what some common practices are across districts. And so I think that it definitely helps me to sort of feel more comfortable with the change. Does anyone else have questions about the community service piece?
I guess I was just wondering what the impetus was for the change. Like, what was the experience? We're
Sure.
having now versus.
Yeah, so when this was all created back in the late 90s, we had a full-time person that oversaw community service. And I feel like I spoke about that possibly at our site council presentation earlier. We had someone to oversee the entire community service process. They actually had their own office here. They vetted all of the opportunities for students. They had more community resources. And I'm not saying that the community isn't there providing those opportunities for us, but since 1996, 1997, when we first did this, a lot has changed in the profile of a student. And students are working now. Students are student athletes. They are student athletes and they're working. They're in the theater program. And when we talk about the 140 hours, when we talk about community service, we want students to do it well, and we want them to be invested in what they're doing. We don't want them just to check a box. And we want them to find something that's meaningful to them. And over the course of my time as director of guidance, as a guidance counselor, director of guidance, and now principal, I've seen that students are trying to get it done and do it well. But honestly, since COVID, some of those opportunities have gone away. And even during COVID, when you looked at our original community service opportunities, it could not be with a family member. It could not be something in the house. And we really adapted that over the past 5 years because people's living situations have changed. Families are working now, and students are at home taking care of siblings, and they need to be credited for that. And students were coming to me saying, I am hanging out with my grandparent because there is no one else around. And not that they need to get service hours for that, but that was something they were never doing before. So we want to recognize everything that the student is doing and giving them time and recognition for that. So for every student, that community service looks different, but they're invested in what they're doing. But that 140 hours on top of being a full-time student and being involved in other extracurriculars at school was just getting a lot. And there were people signing off, if I could be truly, I'm going to be truly honest, signing off on hours that people didn't do. And we don't have anyone who has the time to go through every single one of those and check all of that. And that's a small piece of it, but that was a piece of it as well. Students would do 2 hours of community service, but people were checking 10 hours of community service for that. And I'm not judging anyone when I say that, please know I'm not. But we need to make this workable for our students. We need to make it workable for our community. And that's one of the reasons that we were looking at this. We looked at all the other districts. And my daughter has an 80-hour community service expectation, but they have a full-time career counselor who oversees the community service opportunities. And we're getting communication from that person on a regular basis. And I'm just giving that as an example. So that is quick reason for looking at it this way. I hope I answered that.
You did. Have you ever thought about, because I agree with you on like sports clubs,
Yes.
just, again, involvement within the school community or within the community broadly,
Yes.
I think is always really important things to kind of force kids to get out of their shells and get activated
Yes.
and all those things. Have we thought about, expanding requirements to say like participation in those things is some form of credit in order to say like you could do some combination of both community service outside the school as well as participation within the school?
You mean within the clubs and the athletics and so forth?
within any.
Absolutely. That's actually part of our conversation, and I'm sorry I didn't say that. I was thinking that, but if we're part of the dance team or we're part of DECA, if we're doing fundraisers or outreach within our group, let's give the hours for that because that's meaningful to me. That's meaningful to me as this individual, right? And that's what I'm invested in. So absolutely, that is something we want to have those conversations with the advisors, with the coaches, with the students, and provide those opportunities as well, because those opportunities are meaningful to our students.
So do those hours count against the 60 now or no?
It's never been something that people have said,
Okay.
well, they're doing it for their team, so why are we giving them hours for it? And my feeling is they're benefiting from that experience. I think the cheer team recently did a babysitting night, or it could have been the dance team. They're benefiting from interacting with the younger children, and the younger children are benefiting from them. That's a role model, right? And I think that's a learning experience for both sides. So I think they should be credited for that. It's not formally written into the plan, but that is something we want to expand upon. I've spoken with some site council members about that as well, about expanding those opportunities and really working with our student body and staff to have that.
I'll just note that I see on the list of examples of service may include, but are not limited to, the following, and as includes advocacy or political campaigning. So I think it would be kind of exciting if, I know there's an override campaign getting off the ground as we speak. And so if any students are seeking hours to fulfill, it would be a good opportunity in the next couple months for them to participate in that, since, you know, that's going to be huge civic engagement for our community.
And some of them will be
So,
able to vote.
Just a plug for that. Yeah. Yeah.
Happy to talk about that. And
If anyone needs, to find a way to spend their hours.
I just have a logistical question. So you mentioned that there's no one overseeing this community service hours.
not full-time.
Not full time. Okay, so we do have a part-time person.
We
overseeing.
have the admin assistant for the counseling department tracks the hours, files it away.
Okay.
People will reach out to me or their counselor or the director of counseling and say, can this opportunity count? So that's how but there's not a streamlined process as there was when we had someone full-time doing that.
And the 15-hour per year thing, or the 60 hours total?
Sure.
What if the student decided to do just focusly one semester?
Students do that all of the time, and usually those students, they'll get the 140 or the 60 or whatever the case. They'll get that done over the summer, but they're going to continue to do other things. Most of our students here, again, because they're so outgoing, they exceed the 140. A majority do. But I want to make this attainable for all of the students, so they continue to do it. They absolutely can get it all done at once. But
I hosted a rice. They were in they were in a crunch, so I hosted them.
Nice.
Is there the opportunity for for the community to know about giving opportunities for volunteering? So for example, I know the other day they did for the town meeting, or one of the town meetings 2 weeks ago, they did babysitting so families could come and go to the meeting because it was at 5:00.
Yes.
So those sort of things, if there's not somebody really central in that role, is there a way to make, for the community members, to make volunteer opportunities known to students, or is it more they have to reach out and find them? I mean, is there a way to make sure, as you guys have a list of, you have a number of things listed here,
Right.
but are there other ways?
In the weekly newsletter, there is a section that I've worked on with the director of counseling and Colleen McDougall, who is the admin assistant in the counseling department, where it's a running sheet, for lack of better words, in the weekly newsletter where people can look that information up. People reach out, and to what happened to that, someone reached out to me, and I sent it to the two club advisors. I'm like, are there any students available?
Right.
And then we did that. We've reached out to the community, not consistently, but definitely, we do a day of service for the freshmen in the fall. And it's a whole day of community service, and we tell the students, reach out to the community. I think it's also important for the students to make those connections, and not for us to necessarily give them all of those opportunities. They're young adults, they need to have those conversations. But we're very flexible.
Yeah.
And again, something I'm willing to look at as well.
Yeah.
But
Thanks.
yes, no problem.
So is it fair to say if someone have a volunteer opportunity that they want to propose to the high schoolers, we can send you an email about that?
Within reason, yes. There are conditions that we won't allow students. If they're serving alcohol, we will not allow students. We're not going to have students sign up for that. Babysitting, we take that seriously, but at the same time, we want to be mindful of those connections. So we try to be thoughtful about those types of things. Absolutely.
Great. So the competencies piece. Was
Competency. So if anyone watched the news today, the state of Massachusetts is coming out with a proposal. I don't know but prior to that, we have been working here at the high school with directors, Superintendent Burrows, to put together a competency determination to make up for the fact that MCAS is no longer a graduation requirement. Just to touch upon what was proposed by the state of Massachusetts, right now they're saying 2 years of language arts, 2 years of math, which require algebra and geometry, or integrated math 1 and 2, 1 year of biology, chemistry, physics, or technology, and then starting in 2027, 1 year of social studies. That's their proposal. That's what I heard on the news. I have not received a memo from DESE, but that's what I heard on the news. I don't know if anyone else did. And again, it's just a proposal. So when I think of what we currently have for graduation requirements for our students, we already exceed that. So for the competency determination, again, a document I believe I did share with everyone, you have to look at the different categories. For our current class of 2025, if they've passed MCAS, they're all set. If they haven't passed MCAS, we are looking at what MCAS have they passed, and we're including the November 2024 retest because they also put it at the discretion of the district. So for our class, again, our current seniors, we're looking at everything up into and including the November 2024 retest for scores. And then if a student is new to us, their senior year, there's all of these different categories, and I won't go through every scenario, but looking at the transcript from their sending school and looking at the programming from the sending school to see that it makes sure that it's comparable to Milton High School. So for the class of 2026, our current juniors and below that, if they've already passed MCAS, they're all set. But then we're also looking at our current programming. So we have our graduation requirements, but they have to pass biology, English 1 and 2, and integrated math 1 and 2, which our courses are in alignment with the state curriculum, Mass State curriculum standards, but that's what a student would have taken in coursework prior to taking that content appropriate MCAS. I hope I explained that correctly. So that is what we're proposing at this time for competency determination until the state comes up with new proposals. And of course, there's always those exceptions. If a student is finding success in those courses, but keeping in mind they have to pass those courses to graduate. But if a student requires modified work, then what else are we asking for them? A portfolio to show more work to make sure that they're meeting those standards as well. I'm just giving a brief synopsis of the document that I've shared with you, but that is what we are currently proposing. Did you want to add anything to that based on our conversations?
No, I mean, I think the team that weighed in on this was really thoughtful in thinking about all of these, instances of 4 students might need this kind of pathway, correct. 5 need that pathway. So I think this approach is going to meet all students' needs.
Yes.
And still meet standards. So I feel comfortable with it. It's interesting where the state is right now in terms of sending out. They're getting public comment now on their draft, which went out today. So I haven't seen anything official yet.
No, it was a news segment I saw.
Yeah.
And that's it. And once school committee approves this, what I will do is draft. I already have a draft of a letter, but share it back with you for approval, putting in with what we would like to determine and share it with you for your approval, and then share it out with families once that is approved.
Does anyone have any questions on this piece?
Great.
Okay, sounds good. So then the new courses, was that the final piece?
The final piece was just the new courses. Again, I shared that all with you as well. There's 2 new courses, one in social studies, an unleveled course, for which is called America Today, How Did We Get Here, which is an unleveled course open to juniors and seniors that will also satisfy social studies requirement, 3 years of a social studies requirement. We're looking to switch one of our senior English courses, which is a semester course, to a full year course. We're also a very strong class of sports and society. We're going to offer it at the honors level, which is new, and at the CP level. Very high enrollment in all of those courses. And we're also bringing back oceanography. So that's not a new course. It's a course that we've offered here years ago, and we're bringing that back as well, just as another option for our students in the science department. So those are the new courses. We're renaming a few courses, but again, the content isn't changing. Automotive is changing to power mechanics, and computer technology is being changed to intro to cybersecurity to gear more towards what the content of the course is and what they're actually doing in the coursework. So those are the new courses. I'm happy to elaborate a little bit more if you want more specifics on the course content. Our counselors are in classrooms. Now they'll be going to Pierce Middle School next week, I believe, to talk about all of the new courses and go over how to enroll in them and whatnot. So those are the new courses. The program of studies just keeps growing and growing.
Would you please tell me what CTE stand for?
Career tech education. So that's our business courses, automotive, culinary.
And they're semester-long course or?
Depends on the course.
Oh, okay.
Most are semester-long, but some are AP Micro and AP Macro are year-long courses, but a lot are semester-long courses.
And it's open to all students in high school?
As long as you meet the prereqs, yes.
Okay.
So to take automotive, you usually have to take intro to car care first. So there's just prereqs that you take still at the high school, but yes.
Oh, got it.
Yep.
Any other discussion? Thank you so much for bringing this to us. So I will make a motion to approve the recommendations regarding the Milton High School Program of Studies. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Do you have what
I'm sorry, I had to discuss, not really for her, but more what we talked about just briefly last time around just like the broader conversation around, which I know we don't have time for and we don't have capacity for right now, right? Our focus is elsewhere as it needs to be. But like, what would be the time frame for having a conversation kind of in towards next year around, and I guess, again, first question was more like, is the board interested in that, as I am, around, a conversation around our high school graduation, your world language requirements, other requirements, those types of things, like more holistically. I'm not sure when the last time any board looked at this more holistically, but yeah, just more wondering, less wanting to have the conversation right now, but more wondering, like, what does that time frame look like, given I assume we'd have to have it kind of settled before this course of study kind of vote next February.
Right.
And it's something that we've talked about.
It is.
Yeah.
To your point in the last meeting, financial literacy, I wholeheartedly agree. I think that is something students need to have before they graduate from high school. Personal finance, they need that. So I would love to be part of that conversation. World language, we did have that, but in light of that would require more staffing, and I'm not ready to make that proposal yet. One of the things, I'm sorry, that I did forget was the seal of biliteracy, which I feel is a nice switch, and if we're not adding world language as a graduation requirement, opening up seal of biliteracy as an option for students as well. We should have done this a long time ago. And I would like to almost pilot that next year and really see how that goes with our students and see what we have to do to make that happen. We have so many students who aren't even enrolled in world language that would qualify for that. So I would love to do a deep dive into what we're currently doing and what we can do and what staffing we need to make that happen. So I'd very much like to be part of that conversation, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
So would it be kind of like a fall time frame that would be appropriate?
I think sooner than that, honestly. I don't know. I don't know if people do work over the summer or not, but I think it needs to be before that, and I think there needs to be more conversation respectfully outside of school committee as well. To see, I can gather information from other districts, but what does it involve? What's the budget implications for that and everything else? So I would think possibly in the summer, late spring, early summer, just to start having those conversations. So we're not rushing it, because we will start, the budget requests in the fall, right? So we want to know what we need before we do that, and really reviewing what our graduation requirements are. And that's my 2 cents.
Makes sense.
I think that timeline makes sense, because if we wait till the fall, we're already starting level service development where like the engines are moving. So I think having time to think more deeply about some of the structures, and if there are pieces that we may want to rearrange as we look at adding different programs, which may require some shifts and changes around staffing. Right. That's the kind of thing we need a fair bit of runway for. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay.
So I'm good?
So we have a motion made and seconded, so now we just can vote. So all in favor of that motion? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
I'll
you.
represent all of you at
Please do.
hockey tonight.
Go
I hope you all feel
Wildcats.
better.
Miserable group.
Text me a
send
score
updates.
update. Yeah.
I feel like this deja vu. I feel like I did the same
Yeah,
time
you
last
did.
year. Right? Thank you all. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks. All right. So I'm experiencing another glitch with my
I'm sorry.
thing here, so I'm following along on my phone. I'm not like watching TikToks on my phone during a meeting. I don't know how to get on TikTok, but if I did, that's why I'm looking at my phone. I'm looking at our
children can show you
documents. I wait until 8th. I signed that pledge, so they can't show me yet. Okay. But you can keep going.
Yeah. So this morning at Finance Subcommittee, we reviewed the non-override reduction list that has been shared out publicly. Just to let you all know kind of what we're doing we did share at the end of last week that information to the community. We are now working on impact statements for those positions so that, when a community member looks at some of these titles, they might not really know exactly what they are and what their impact is. So we are working to present this information as clearly as possible. So it's when you look at an inclusion specialist, you know what that position does and what the impact is on the system if we do not have that position. I think that's going to be really important to get everybody understanding kind of how all these pieces fit together. So I guess just, and Mark, I don't know if you want to share anything in terms of the Finance Subcommittee, because this is kind of stemming from that conversation this morning.
Yeah, again, we've had lots of Finance Subcommittee meetings, many more. Just to initially, this is our first opportunity to talk about the final reduction list, which obviously was shared right before break. I think, still using opportunity to kind of learn about what these things are. I think, as you've said, around creating the narrative will be very helpful. I like how you have it on the website, right? Because the way you shared it with us, obviously, is this table, but on the website, breaking it down clearly by school impact, I think was very helpful for folks to understand, but certainly like a more narrative approach of what this means for the nursing department, as the public speaker said, or what this means for the preschool program, right, when we have some cuts to that, or what this means for class sizes at Pierce. We're cutting a whole team out of the 6th grade, or any and all of those things I think are helpful. We started having conversations too just around which of these, given kind of the request of the select board for us to continue to look at essentially limiting our budget request even further below kind of level service in order to try and shrink the override request for the whole town. Just, what of these cuts or reallocations are things that we will need to think about and live with, and just started having conversations, obviously, with many of the members here around that. So looking forward to.
And we did
continuing
just
that.
in terms of process. So we did yesterday meet with our principals. So central office leadership and principals met in preparation for the work that you just mentioned, Mark, in terms of getting guidance from the select board to take another look at level service. So I do have a few slides to share, and I don't know if that will be under FY26, under your report, probably. That's where it is right now.
It's under finance, isn't it? Yeah, so in point of fact, when we approved the agenda, I could have said, I don't have a chair's report, any separate thing. So we're sort of like, we're flowing into finance right now, which is good. And certainly the non-override budget development is very interconnected with FY26. So I don't know if you want to, I know we also have an FY25 budget update under finance. Is that correct?
We do. Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to like take that, kind of do that, and then return to non-override in the context of FY26 it's whatever you both think makes most sense.
I think we could continue the FY26 conversation and come
think that
back to
makes sense.
FY25.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Need to share this.
You want to present those? Yeah. Just a few slides here, just to provide a little structure. I call this revised proposed budget. I know it sounds a little strange, but didn't want people to mix up our FY26 proposed budget previously, which was level service, with this new budget. So that's why I named it. We can change the name later. So as I mentioned, with direction from you all and from the select board, we're kind of going back to the drawing board. We did review this final reduction, the non-override list, as a starting point for this conversation, and then kind of move forward from there. And of course, this is a bit challenging because we've kind of been asked to return and reanalyze, but we don't exactly know. We don't have a number yet, right, in terms of where we're landing. So I'll share a little bit about kind of what we did, where we landed, and then would love everyone's feedback here in terms of next steps. Do you want to go to the next slide? So we started off with looking at a reduction that, again, we started with the non-override list. We identified $1 million in cuts to bring level service down. At the same time, we also looked at, and I know we've talked about this in a number of meetings, we also looked at the things that we've been talking about prioritizing for a long time that would be, I think we're poised, one, with the ELA curriculum and the curriculum development to support the ELA curriculum investment. That has been something that we've had kind of in process for about 2 years, and we are ready to go on it. I think it will be very impactful to learning. So we have included that. We have heard from the community that this is a priority. We've heard it from you all too, that this is a priority. So we added this into this revised proposed budget. We also have additional ELL support.
Just in terms of, because before you presented level need, level service over here, and then level service plus needs over here. So just in clarifying what FY26 revised budget proposal, it's an attempt to incorporate the highest priority needs into something
that is slightly below
less
level.
than level plus needs, the way it had originally been presented, right?
Less than level.
Less than level.
Right,
Yep.
but that still
Below
allows
level.
us to address these needs that must be
The highest, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. So the other thing on here is ELL support, and that's additional staffing. Our numbers continue to increase, and we can't sustain the services that we need to provide to these students with our current staffing. So that is like a...
Was that on our needs request for this year? Or is that something that you're pulling from that, correct?
It
Or
was,
is that,
so we had guidance for ELL.
Yep.
So we had a director position that we had put under student services for ELL.
yep.
As we've been talking with Danielle, who is leading ELL, and looking at our current staffing that we have in our number of students and our projections, we're expecting potentially an additional 30 students beyond where we currently are, and we're already over capacity with our current staff. So it's an area that we're going to have to invest in. So those are the needs that were added here in terms of the
Sorry, I missed the curriculum development. 50. What? I think I missed that.
Oh, when I shared about the ELA curriculum, I said that this supports the investment in the ELA curriculum to provide time for teachers to do training.
To be able to
Yeah.
implement
Yeah.
the
Okay.
curriculum.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just just a little additional clarification too? The ELL support, when we had first discussed the needs-based budget, it was 1.0 FTE. So FTE being the full-time equivalent, it was a 1.0 assistant student services director, so a director level position, and then the 0.4 FTE. We have 2 employees that are currently 0.8 FTE, and so we are just, it's existing staff that we're just increasing their workload. So that was the original proposal. This proposal that you see here through the course of our discussions, this ELL support is 1.4 FTE of teaching staff. So it's not an administrative position. It would be, it's the bargaining unit is Unit A, so it would be 1.4 teaching staff in Unit A and not a director level position. So just to provide some clarification.
Thank you.
So that's new over and above what we have.
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct.
It's cheaper than adding 0.4 FTE for staffing and a 1.0. Yeah.
And then could you just elaborate how you got to the reductions from level service number?
So that number is a number of both programmatic changes and some position reductions.
Okay.
We can't articulate those yet because we're in the process of that, and we need to communicate with the people in those positions prior to sharing them here.
Okay. But that's kind of the number you got to that you're okay with, right? Like,
we think so. I mean, I think this is a question for you all too, right? In terms of, and on the next slide you can see the total. If we've hit the mark or not in terms of the number. Again, we were asked by the select board to come up with a new, revised budget number. You can see here that the total has dropped to 72,962, an 8.53% increase.
So that includes the addition of the needs that have been prioritized in it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I don't need to jump in with my first reaction to that.
Go ahead.
So my reaction to that would be, thank you for putting in the work to do that, for one thing. And I think that it's the effort we are in a process of working towards a compromise. I mean, that is actually what we are needing to do. And so in that process, we are going to not get everything that we may have started out thinking we needed. I guess for myself with the number, I'll just go on the record to say, this would be the lowest. I not knowing what that $1 million consists of makes it a little hard to say if I am comfortable with this or not, because I do not understand yet what the actual implications of that sacrifice essentially in the service of the compromise collaboration, let's call it. Okay, I'm not quite sure I can say I'm comfortable with it if I don't know what it actually means. But I will say, for me and my vague understanding of where we're at, this to me is, we might not need to go that far, actually.
Great.
Quite that far. But I think that where we're at is, because to me that represents a significant change. And I think I was, thinking maybe more along the lines of $500,000 rather than $1 million. But again, as you named in the beginning,
Well, this is 600.
That's 600.
This is 600 drop from before because we added 400. So it's a reallocation of 400.
okay.
Yeah.
So
So the net,
okay. Thank you. So this is what I get for not being able to look at it for myself in front of me.
It's okay. So
It's the reductions
reduction
of
and then plus this.
adding this, and so it nets out 600,000 below the original level service ask.
Yeah.
Okay, then I retract my concern. I was thinking okay, I mean, but again, what I said before still does stand. We're not approving. Here's my question. Next week we're slated to. I know we have vote tonight on here. I'm not sure if we're needing to do that, but next week is our budget hearing and a vote to approve a budget request. That has been March 5th is what we've been driving towards through this whole cycle. Will you be able to tell us by next Wednesday, what that $1 million in cuts represents in detail? Okay. Because I do think that would be important for us to understand as far as the choices that it comprises. But
does anyone remember what our increase was last year for our budget?
It's close.
You mean the budget?
That percentage?
It was 8.5.
Okay, so it's pretty close.
Yeah.
That's good to know. I do have to say I really appreciate this thinking of kind of reallocating and seeing where we can combine the needs base with the level service and just kind of prioritizing some of those to include versus giving the answer every year no, we couldn't get to that this year and so on and so forth. And I know there are a lot of needs on the needs base that we still can't make happen, but this process of kind of looking at our internal numbers and seeing where we can move is good practice, I think. So I'm glad that we're going in that direction just to kind of, get into the weeds with what we need to do and move things around. So I'm glad that we're incorporating that into our process as a way also to build transparency and trust too. I think it comes back to that a little bit, that we're kind of looking at that and improving our process of checks and balances and so on and so forth. So I think I appreciate the thought that went into that. I know you guys had put this together pretty quickly, so appreciate that too.
thank you for doing that.
I agree with that, but definitely I think I'm with Lizzie in terms of wanting to understand what those reductions are. Are these student-facing positions, and what impact is it going to have on the student experience?
Right.
It just something for us to know that it is sort of an effort to compromise and sort of meet somewhere in the middle, but at the same time, we know that our budget to begin with was it's not like it has extras, right? So it's a lot of the folks that we do need to continue to provide the quality education that we are so proud of. So in order to be able to do that, it is really, whether it's 600 or $1 million, it is a lot, and it's going to have an impact on the experience. So I think I would love to sort of understand it a little bit more. I do think that it's good that we're gonna, I think as a practice, we're going to be taking that discipline to look at line items, right, and understand and where can there be more efficiencies. That's a good question to ask yourself all the time, and it should be ongoing, that we don't just continue to just go status quo. That's not okay. But I do think that it's really tough when we've always been very lean to begin with.
Right. Because it's all relative.
Right, exactly.
I do understand that, but I think that we also have to be mindful, the flip side of that, when we look at, tax implications and so on and so forth. For example, today I got an email from Dr. Fish about the spring trip to Quebec and their families that requested financial assistance, and how can their families going on the trip support that. So there is that too. So we have to be mindful that not all families can afford things as much as we would like to
no,
provide.
for
So
sure. I understand that.
I think that's where it's like, for me, the compromise part is important because we want something that everybody can support and also participate in. So I think, so I do appreciate us kind of looking at it this way, and I know it is a lot to ask, right? Those, even with $600,000, it is a lot. But I think for us to just be thoughtful and mindful of that is a good practice to be, because, like as the previous speaker, public comment speaker said, it's like if we had to go the route of a non-override budget, it would be just awful. So just being mindful of that. So I just appreciate the team here trying to really put this together and just kind of thinking of it from that standpoint, because again, all of this needs community support, right? At the end of the day, we need everybody to get behind this so everyone feels like, all right, we're doing what we can to be efficient, to Selena's point, but at the same time, and we can build support that way. So thank you all.
And it's a really important point you're making, Anna. And a sort of adjacent point, I think, is something that I've seen raised. I know there was an open letter to the select board that was shared with us that, within hours had like nearly 1,000 signatures from members of the community. I know there's different tools being developed to allow homeowners to do the calculations, and a lot, the important takeaway from that is how relatively small the actual impact is on a single taxpayer month to month between different override numbers that would create quite, different opportunities and levels of service for the town. So I think those are things the select board is needing to weigh as they land on their actual number, right? Which it's like the trade-offs between.
I know there isn't much difference between the month to month, but that base number is pretty significant.
No, exactly.
So I just don't want to discredit that. That's not big enough. I understand that, but sometimes
considerations.
Families are trying to make ends meet, so I get it.
But I also think it's important too, and I think this was we made this point in Finance Committee this morning, just to think about the percentage of the override. I think it's important to know that we have been there before where it's been close to 10% or 10%. So we're not, it's like if you just look at the number, right? The amount itself, it's like there has been inflation. It's different. So we can't just focus on the number and what it's been, but it's more like the percentage. And the percentage is actually comparable. So it's not, ridiculously out of this world. It really is, the percentage it's something where we've been there before, but we can't just get fixated on just the number that it was before. And I think that's important for us to know. And it's a big I think undertaking for the folks who are going to be working on the ground, including some of us, as we're going to contribute in the way that we can to the override. And so how do you make sure that folks understand that piece, because it's nuanced, but I think it's important to put it into that context.
May I ask a question about the additional two level servers that include the two curriculum, the ELA curriculum and the curriculum development? What is the curriculum development for?
So it would be for time during the summer, time after school, time to pay people to come together and do training and implement.
Pay teachers. Pay Milton teachers to be trained to effectively implement the new curriculum.
To learn the new curriculum, to be able to, because it's going to be a change for our teaching staff as well. And so we just want to make sure that they feel like they're adequately prepared to actually use the curriculum once they receive it, instead of just receiving it in and then just kind of handing it off to them and saying like, here you go, good luck. Because we know when they feel comfortable with the curriculum and they understand truly that kind of the best practice of how to share that information with the students, that really gives them the ability to teach the curriculum with fidelity. So just making sure that we're not buying something and not being able to use it well.
And is it fair to say that's like we've done that before with the nuke math, like that's a common practice when a district adopts a new curriculum? So it's not just something you're deciding to do, it's something that is done. Yeah.
And it's a process, the curriculum, kind of the piloting, selecting which curriculum we feel is appropriate for the district, making sure that we're even testing out different curriculum resources. It's a pretty extensive process that has to happen to make sure that we're making the right choice and making the right investment.
So how old is our current ELA curriculum? And is it necessary to do it
It was
this year? Could this money be used to give back to the reductions from level servers that we think could be able to wait? Do you think this can wait until?
No,
I don't think so. I think it's long overdue, right? I would say it's been several years.
We've been waiting for several years to get up to standard on this, and we actually even delayed the ELA study this year. And so next year, it is time for us to move forward. So that our curriculum is aligned with the DESE standards and the science of reading standards.
I think our curriculum is from 2017.
Yeah.
Reach for Reading.
So I do have a question. So once you purchase the curriculum, you have to go through the test, or what you have to identify which curriculum first, right? You have to go through that process. Okay. So this is not something that would get implemented in September. It would, or will it?
No, it would be developed over. So, Kat DeRoche, who's our K Literacy Director, has done lots and lots of work on this. Even has people selected, I think, to begin this work. So, these monies will be used to develop the curriculum over the year. So it's not like turnkey on September 1st. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing just I wanted to add here too is that we talked in the fall about our needs-based budget and looking ahead to year 2 and talking about coaching. And that's where coaching really comes in terms of having a literacy coach to go in. You adopt a new curriculum. We're also, as you know, in the process of looking at our instructional framework and making decisions around the systems that we need to develop. So to sustain any of those things, you need to have not just professional development once in a while, like twice a year when we have a full, in-service day, but it needs to be consistent and ongoing, and that's kind of where that kind of like long-range thinking about next year, looking at coaching to support both this implementation and the work that we're doing on the instructional framework.
So can you speak a little bit more to that? Because I think I think we could anticipate the question. It has come up around the choice of including a one-time cost of curriculum into the operating budget, and what the implication is therefore years out. And so can you just, I think we all are aware that one of the factors where it has to be a number that the majority of the town can get behind, that allows us to meet our students' needs, that can last for several years. And that we haven't really talked about that with this new revised request. Is this something you're comfortable is sustainable across that? I think the 5 years is sort of what's been thrown around, but Can you speak to that piece? Because I think incorporating the one-time cost, and then you mentioned coaching comes behind the acquiring of the curriculum. And so including that here, does that support the sustainability of this request?
I mean, that's I think a decision-making point into the future, but we talked about this, looking at our budget and curriculum needs across all subject areas, that this is a one-time purchase, but we also need to look at our math curriculum. We also need to look at all the other curricula that we would be looking to purchase or training to bring in. So this dollar amount, while it I know there was talk about using some kind of one-time funds for this purchase, but I think having funding to support other adoptions is common. It makes a lot of sense. And Katie was talking about that earlier. Do you want to talk about anything else?
It came up a little this morning. I think it's helpful to just get the community understanding the rationale.
And I think the ELA curriculum is the curriculum that we've identified and that we've prioritized, but curriculum development is ongoing, and it should be. When we have our robust curriculum review cycles, the need for curriculum materials will never go away. And so it truly is an operational need that it will be reoccurring year after year after year. And so if we're able to create the funding for curriculum materials in the budget for this year, it creates a sustainable funding mechanism for us in future years where it won't be that one-time hit to the operating budget. And when I say hit, it's that significant increase that we see when we put those substantial additional $250,000 amounts. It will be built into the base of the operating budget, and it will help to create that sustainability, and it will create it will help lessen some of those large increases that we see year over year. I also think that there's other ways that there's opportunities for us with the budget development process when we talk about some of the funding sources. So not only the operating budget, but there's also the capital budget. And we know that the town has been very supportive in funding our capital expenses and our capital improvement plan. And then also just talking about the creation of potentially having a special ed stabilization fund that will help offset some of the expenses that we see year to year. The other thing, a consideration, financial consideration when we look at curriculum materials too, is sometimes with the newer materials, I think historically, the one-time, when we thought of like a one-time expense, it was tied to a textbook. And so it was always kind of like, okay, we had a traditional textbook. And we know that curriculum materials these days are not traditional, just hardcover. It's not a one-time. Typically the materials it could be kind of like your more traditional text, but then it could be consumables. And so we have to purchase the consumables every year. And then it could be an online subscription that there is a fee that will incur every year. And so for us to be able to build that sustainability, to include that into our budget, that is going to just ensure that we have high quality resources for our students for future years. And I think it truly will be a significant resource for us in the budget development.
That makes complete sense, the way you just explained that. And it just makes me think that next, for FY26, the focus happens to be ELA. But this is work of a high quality district year to year, as you're saying. And through the ongoing reviews, you're identifying which are the focus area for a given year. That makes a lot of sense.
So I do have a question. I know with the stabilization fund that you're creating for special ed, you can use it for certain things only, like if costs come up, like unexpected, like the ELL positions that we were just talking about, that there's a high need, so we had to prioritize that. So if we have, money allocated every year or built into the budget for curriculum, and if needs arise, how do we continue to make sure that those curriculum needs are met if other needs come in? I was just wondering if there's a way you're standardizing that so that they're only used for those things, so that we don't have to, next year we can't, bring in the literacy coaches because we had to use that somewhere else, and so on and so forth.
So that was another part of the process, and I think that is why we're looking, when we were talking about the level service budget, and because the number is the 9.4%, because the process of going through budget development was truly looking at historical expenditures and identifying different budget lines that have historically not been funded appropriately. And in certain instances, our historical expenses had exceeded the budget in areas like utilities, substitute coverage, maybe some of our facilities expenses. And so through the budget development process, when we looked at each one of the lines, we tried to identify areas where we may have had a structural deficit with the historical budget and the current budget that we're operating in this fiscal year. We identified that and we tried to address that. And by address that, I mean we adjusted it based off of known rates, projected utilization, any changes in market fluctuation or our contracts. And by doing that and by appropriately budgeting based off of actuals and not just carrying historical budget numbers forward, that will allow us to, instead of having to, because the school department budget is a bottom line budget. And so we have the ability to kind of, if there are lines that are over, you can take from, not take, but it balances out with some of the other lines. And so by having each one of the budget lines funded appropriately, it will ensure that we don't have to take from any of our instructional lines.
I think that's a very important point to continue to emphasize to the community. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think this is, again, where you're creating systems and putting processes in place so that as we continue to ask support for our schools and what we offer, we also want to make sure that people are getting what they think they're getting, So I think this is a good way to ensure that, and I think that part is very important to emphasize, that that's really why we're, this budget number is kind of, where it is, so that we can ensure, again, it's another system, another process, checks and balances that we are doing. So I think that kind of clarity is really important to get out there for support.
You got anything? I got something. I just have some thoughts, and I appreciate all discussion. I agree with most everything you say. I think as I think about the people watching, or the recordings that people will watch at some point after they finish the hockey game. A couple things. I completely agree. I cannot really assess the $1 million cuts as they are. I appreciate the effort, and I know again the select board kind of has been driving us towards that, and we talked about that this morning. So appreciate that. But to Selena's point, it's just hard to, without knowing the exact impact. That said, I know this is a hard process because it's deeply personal, right? Those cuts are people, and so you slowing down and making sure that we are appropriately communicating and having those personal conversations, making sure people are informed, not finding out here as much as we are trying to move with urgency to address this. I appreciate that. I commend that. And I know, at times we talk about things like we want to be efficient, we want to maximize value and things like that. But I think another way we can talk about, when we're talking about efficiency, we're talking about cuts to positions, and we're talking about people. And so we just, even with this, there are people who are going to be impacted. And so I think I don't think anybody at this table takes that lightly. I think we all understand. We're all operating under the knowledge that we are in a very tough spot as a town. we collectively have a goal, along with this select board, to like get a large enough override that allows us to continue to support the functioning of our town and for us, for our schools, for our kids, but also one that is going to get approved.
Right.
And that is the balance as folks look out
First by the select board
yeah.
before we even get the opportunity to go to the town.
Yeah. Yes. First, it has to be, it has to be a number that the select board believes will pass, because that's their goal too. But we are trying and do best we can to kind of thread through both those needles. I think when I look at the non-override list, like it would be devastating. It would be devastating.
That's kind of the.
That can't happen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shaken. I think we are all here shaken by the thought of this, and I think everybody in town, if they haven't seen it, like, should be shaken by the thought of the override not getting through. And I think every step that I know each person at this table has taken since we've started really diving into this is with that lens of like, we need to take the next step that's going to give us the best chance to get the override in order to, support the operations of our schools. And I think that is continuing, right, what we are all doing collaboratively. It's like whatever the next step is that's going to help people understand, feel trust, feel connected, and feel supportive of this override. And I really appreciate the work Katie is doing around using this as an opportunity to kind of reset, and not just Katie, but also the whole team really on the central office, of like use this to reset, right size our budget line items and make this budget more sustainable for next year, for future years, right? All the stuff you're talking about with the curriculum, like that sustainability is, I think, been a central part of the conversations we've had at finance. I hope that's come out here and within the presentations we've done for the town thus far. And like we want to make sure we have a sustainable budget. We want to address that kind of like bottom level of just like operating with sound budgets. And I think we all know, and what I appreciate about the work you're doing is that at the same time we can't stand still. Just rolling over what we're doing this year into next year is not good enough. Like we need to continue to push the envelope. And so I like that we are looking for ways to incorporate the ELA curriculum, incorporate curriculum development, support with teachers. That's all fantastic. Address long-term needs for our ELL populations, which is growing statewide, and we are no exception. I think, as I think of this, like, I would plead with the select board as they look at a number next week to kind of consider two things, because unfortunately we don't get to set the number. I would love to set the number, but that's not our purview, that's their purview. But I think I would implore them to also think about how they are making this sustainable, right, and how they are setting us up, because as I said at our presentation to them, our budget increase next year is not going to be 2.5%. It's just not. And so they need to be thinking about how they're setting a number that is going to carry us through for 4 or 5 years. We need that. And the other thing I would ask them to think of, because I understand why we're going through this, we're trying to reduce the number, we want to make it palatable for them and for the town as a whole, but I hope they carefully consider the tax implications of this, to the point you were making. Because while $600,000 in the aggregate is a lot of money, and it's impactful, and every dollar impacts each family differently, right? I just hope they publicly discuss what that actually means in terms of the difference in the monthly cost to a taxpayer. Because by my math, and I'm happy to be corrected, I think that's on the average house $6 a month is what we're talking about. And again, I don't know the extent, like what these efficiencies are, and there might be some really smart and good things we should do. And to your point, always want to look to make sure we're investing every dollar.
Result in reduced positions.
Yeah, but like we always want to make sure every dollar is maximizing the impact on kids. But I do think that needs to be very clearly said, is like as big as that number is and as impactful as that cut could be, and I don't know exactly because we don't have the numbers, it's $6 a month for every resident. And so I just hope that is clearly communicated in whatever number they set. Because I really like what the public comment speaker talked about in terms of piece by piece, and she was saying that as trying to hedge her comment, but I think it's important. Every single one of these things that we're talking about from the override, every part is a piece, right? And the only way you build something great is piece by piece. Like every piece is important. And the surest way to destroy something is to take away piece by piece. And so we need to be mindful of what are the pieces, the impact that each of those pieces have, that each of those pieces are people. They're members of our community, and they are, all of them right now, having real impacts on kids in certain ways. And maybe there are different ways we wish they have impact and other ways we want to maximize it. But I bet there's almost no position where like kids are engaging and they don't feel real deep connection to some. And the staff who are doing the work don't feel really deep connection to our kids. So all of those things I just wanted to share. And I also just want to name for the community that like we take our role, I think, very seriously. We know the school department is the largest part of the townwide budget, but I think and I know the increase is quite large for us, but it should be said that like no other department right now that I'm aware of is being asked to cut resources, like look at something less than level service. And so we again commend you, and I commend the group as like we are trying to think collaboratively of how we work with the select board. I think all those things are important, but I do come at it from just like core in me of like I think we right now as a town are not investing enough resources in our schools, and so I struggle a bit with like any thought of like giving up resources, because even if I think programmatically we could invest them in different ways, I don't really think like we just have a bunch of money. We have $600,000 that we can just wipe out without there being real impacts to kind of student learning and student opportunities.
That's really well said.
But I know why we're doing it, and I think it's important. Again, we get to a yes on the override.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Very well said. I think that's exactly
you
it.
do bring up a good point, though. Did the select board come back and say that it needs to be reduced to a certain number?
The only reason I'd say, like at the last select board meeting, the chair said the schools were going to look at this.
Okay.
And so I took that as a indication with no other conversation that we needed to read it. But I don't know if there's an exact number.
Context for the conversation all along has related to the reality that the school's level service, for reasons we all understand, which are out of our control in most men, really, the school's level service came in quite a bit higher than the other town departments. And I think that has been a factor in the conversations and the questions that have been asked then. Is how I understand discussion from the town administrator, for example, in the context of their budget presentations and conversations. And no, I mean, I am not aware of a magic number that I think it's still being figured out, honestly. Okay. And I think
The reason I ask only is, Mark, you make a good point, right? Like, at the end, it's $600,000 is the difference, right? That we're cutting. It's not like we're able to reduce it like drastically to make enough of a difference, right? But it's those 600, that number equates to positions that are needed, right? I'm just curious if there's an opportunity to have a discussion with select board that's not like where we're presenting and they're like, oh no, this number is not going to work, but like, hey, we've cut, but really make a case for, these are the impacts with even these cuts. Does it make, can we go back and maybe the kind of the compromise would be, and I'm just thinking out loud, so feel free to jump in, but like, could we go back to the 9.5 and include those three things? Like, I don't know. I mean, and Katie, see if like if we were to keep it at the level service, but with those three things, and are there minor areas of efficiencies that we can do that don't really impact positions? Because then it would be
I think that's a good
bit more of a, it's us being, I think one thing, you know, and you guys all brought up great points, like when we talk about, you know, positions that impact student learning, right, that's a big deal. Right, but if there are other things that we can do, you know, just like you tighten your belt at home, and you know, like little things you can do here and there to show some efficiencies, that goes a long way, right? But instead of actual positions. So if, I don't know if there's a way to kind of, I know it's more work, but like if there's a way to get to that 9.5 that we've been sharing, but if there's a way to incorporate that $400,000 into that and get to that number, it would be our new level service, you know, in a way. I don't know.
Because then you're looking for a reduction of 400, right?
Yeah.
Where we're just being,
I mean, in terms of
That's different.
non-staffing positions, $400,000, we probably could find that. I think the question for us, and the thing that I think we need from you all, is to know, are we moving forward with this revised budget? Because I don't think it's appropriate for us to like try, you know, like talk to the employees who would be on this list, this new proposed list, and then come back again next week and say, actually, no, we're not doing that now.
I would actually like to see that.
Yeah,
I would like to see the 9.5.
I think
if I can.
100%. We definitely should see what is possible to achieve that doesn't touch any positions.
Yes.
That's still. So whatever within the million that you envision, you know, within the million that you name here, and we don't have a way of knowing how much of that is positions. Like if you can come back to let us know that, and maybe it's, you just said you thought, but I mean, we're not holding you to it, but like you thought, but so I think that, so could we see that? And if they're like, maybe what you're saying, I think what I would like to do is definitely find what efficiencies, if we're using that word to just mean the tightening, like what efficiencies are we able to achieve that don't cut
positions.
I think I have a general sense that some of the things you've considered, not for in the context of non-override or budgeting per se, but just in terms of some of your systems work going forward, I have a sense that some of the things that generally are being considered is like not cutting of positions per se, but perhaps repurposing, recombining, or allowing positions to be more impactfully deployed. So if there's any of that, I think if there's any of that could achieve cost savings in any way, along with whatever else.
I mean, we have that in here, so we are doing that work of looking at like programmatic changes that are going to save pretty significant amount of money going into next year.
Yeah,
I think the bigger question to me is, are we trying to go below the current?
I think that is a question for the select board, honestly.
so hard. Yeah, it's really hard without a number.
I think that is a question for them. But I think what would be helpful would be for us to be able to say, this is what we can achieve without reducing positions.
And are you talking about adding some of the needs to, or not?
Yes.
Is there like a level of what you're talking about that's just you're just looking holistically at the budget and the process and saying, just off the top, like, here are things that we've seen and looking at it from a system standpoint or
that
from
you
an
could think
efficiency
about
standpoint
differently
before anything else. Do you know what I mean? And, and it's almost like the new level service in the sense of with staffing, everything else stays the same, but are there ways that you look at programmatic things, you look at processes, you look at those things, and you're saying that's where these efficiencies are being gained, and then that's that's where you are. You know, I don't know how much of a difference that is. It sounds like there could be some, based on some of the things that we've talked about.
Trying to say.
Yeah. So then that's the true
I feel like
number.
we should definitely do that.
Right. And I want to
And
make
then
sure like
we
that's what
maybe
we're
should
starting
only
with.
go further than that, not knowing how much that, what Amanda just described better than I did, not knowing how far that gets us. Quite honestly, because we've all said that we've formally presented what we need, you know? Beyond efficiencies that are just good to do anyway, in a sense, right?
And that might
think
already
that-
be there.
I mean,
don't
I
know
will
if
say
that's
that-
already accounted for in that level. So, like you might say, nope, that what we
Some of
presented
them might
already,
be there.
Right, it's already done. So I don't want to assume
think
that it hasn't.
Well, I'm just going to say this: if where we end up with the select board is needing to maybe do this full $1 million in cuts. If they say this is, we can, you know, this is better, this is more like what we 600. Right, which requires $1 million of cuts to our level service.
Yes.
And allows us to bring the ask down by 600,000. You know, if that's something that they respond to say, we can work with that, it will be the select board's, like, I feel like at that time, we'll have to look at what the actual position reductions are that would require.
So in that case, we would wait.
I would lead with your FY level service request if you can fit in the requests on page 3 into that and keep that number the same, because that's your level service budget. But you've gone through it and incorporated some of that. You were able to find inefficiencies and move things around, or you know, and still go with that number. If they say that's impossible, right, then you can always go to that. That's the next one, you know. But I think having that,
they are deciding that we are going to need to make some cuts.
I think us showing that we're being efficient in a way, and also incorporating our needs-based budget shows that we are being efficient, right? Without making deep cuts, right? So I think but then, you know, then that's the next conversation. But I think we should lead with what we need at the end of the day, you know, and I think this is a good compromise.
That's another piece of the budget too. We've talked a lot about level service, but we presented the level service budget in November, but we also presented the needs above level service in December. And I think it's really important for the community and people just to understand that just because a need isn't funded from year to year doesn't mean that need goes away.
Right.
And so those needs still exist. And I think through this process, when we say, okay, this is the number of level service, but we're not going to stop there. We're going to look and we're going to say, are there efficiencies? Are there changes that we can make? Are there savings due to attrition and turnover and all of these different things? And we do have these needs. And so we're trying to be mindful of the fact that we know that the town doesn't have unlimited resources and that we have demographics across the board that we need to be very mindful of. But we also need to move forward as a district. And so we're trying to do that kind of within the financial constraints of it's 9.44%, but this is what it gets us. It gets us an ELA curriculum, and it also will allow us to have the staff that makes these buildings run every single day, and they can continue to do so. And I think support the students.
And that argument is very strong because, again, when you're going in, with level service, right? And we're getting ahead. You guys still have to kind of look through what those efficiencies are, right? That don't impact positions. But I think if you do that, then you're asking people to support an override. They still feel like they're getting something, right? Even for level service.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding what we're saying here in terms of, I think the direction where we're leaning is to keep the ask at 9.5.
Yes.
6.4 for the schools. 9.5.
No, 6.4.
People, sometimes people say the schools are asking for 9.5.
Yes, what I meant to say, exactly.
9.4%.
To keep it,
yes.
To keep it at that level. But then what we're coming back with is the combination of what we were calling the level plus needs.
Well, not plus
That gets us to
Plus all needs,
no,
but
not
you're
all the
giving
needs,
these
not the all the needs.
presented
These
tonight.
particular needs, the top priority needs,
Yes.
so that we're in terms of what you're then going to where you're going to try to find savings, or what you're trying to find of savings is 400,000. Is that right? Am I following the conversation?
You got it.
And then, so that sounds like where this group is at tonight. And we've also been able to signal here that if the select board, in its deliberations as it continues toward the number, finds itself unable to agree on the 9.5 for the town. There is obviously then work that would need to be done to identify further reductions that would contribute.
That we've done.
And you have begun, you've done that work.
Right.
It would just be about taking that the next step to make that like real and
Yep. So I think
That's helpful.
Yeah.
my recommendation is just to go with that new level service request that everybody feels like they're not much is changing from last year, but you're getting something more. So
You
it's
want to call it level plus?
I don't know if level plus, because we're not increasing the number above. I worry plus is like, oh, we're actually asking for more.
I think level service sounds.
I guess the one thing I
Level service budget.
disagree on is just the point on like no position impacts. Again, I think positions are really impactful, and like they're, as I said, people behind them. I really defer to y'all though. There could be some just roles, position, comment, as I think you were saying, like that you could combine them, redeploy them in certain ways. And so again, maybe that is part of this, is not just programmatic cuts, and programmatic cuts can be just as impactful as positional cuts. So like there's a mix. So
and then you tell us, like, if that's not possible, like we should definitely have that conversation before. I don't want it to feel like, oh my gosh, like I can't find any inefficiencies, like, and then we're still like at 9.5, so if that's something that we need to discuss and get on the page, I think that's important to do. So, I mean, keep us in the conversation about it.
And we also don't want to make cuts that we would then have to turn around next year and say, oops, we made a mistake.
Exactly.
And so we're just making sure that the cuts that we're making are sustainable, that they will be something that we can operationalize. Definitely all things that we've been talking about, considering, kind of making sure that that's part of this process too.
So I think this has been a good discussion. We're not going to vote on anything tonight. Next week, I think remains our vote. I think that for select board members watching this discussion, or who, get a synopsis, like, I feel like grateful to you all for the conversation, because I think it has provided direction that can support them in taking their next step, and we're just walking along this path together. We're trying to, it's not easy, we're just trying to get where we need to get, so.
We're compromising.
I feel like this is a good next step on our part here, and it has brought further clarity to the process, definitely. And next week, we'll be able to look at this revised level service budget as we've discussed here in further detail, such that we'll be able to vote to approve it, right? Is where we're still trying to get.
So are we presenting to select board? If they're making a decision on a number on Tuesday, how does that work?
I don't know, but we will ask. I think you know, this is something to understand from Nick, you know, from the, like, we can follow up there tomorrow and they can understand kind of where we are right here now, and then see what they think makes most sense for their process. But, and I have not heard anything concrete actually about like what their process is going forward. So obviously we, you know, since the last time we met, the decision was taken that the vote is taking place April 29th. So with that, we have, like, they are needing to move toward a decision, obviously.
Okay.
Thanks for all the work that you're doing. It's a lot.
FY25. Great. Budget update, FY25. So Wednesday we had a finance meeting early this morning where we talked about FY26. We had one on Monday where we talked about FY25. That was our, again, first time to discuss that since our select board presentation. So it was helpful. Katie brought kind of an update as kind of where we stand with some of the action steps that were previously shared at the select board meeting and previously discussed at the school committee meeting around PO freezes, hiring freezes, reducing POs from consolidated facilities, supplemental funding from the state potentially, all things like that. So we got an update on that. Overall, again, they're moving forward with doing things as reducing what is the projected deficit that will arise at the end of the year. Still are not at zero based upon kind of the current planning. So a couple things to share there. We talked a bit about the technology kind of potential request to ask capital to kind of defer our payment for next year and move it into this year. Not 100% sure if capital will do that, the town will do that. So talked about that a bit. I know Katie shared more also about the Special Education Stabilization Fund, as she shared a little bit tonight. And so I think from my perspective within that group, like there was a lot of interest in moving forward with that next year and really talking about how do we establish that, again, as it relates to creating kind of sustainable best practices and how do we create systems that help us avoid us being in the situation we are right now. That will require cooperation with the town and will require cooperation, specifically with the select board. So that is work that is not going to be able to impact the current year FY25 gap, but something that we can look at for next year to address this in the future. Coming out of the meeting, we still talked to Peter around kind of the need for a plan that gets to zero as much as it might hurt. But we need that plan so that this committee as a whole can review it and discuss it and then talk through, what are our next steps in terms of implementing that or alternatives, such as having further conversations with the select board or the town administrator for other options other than cuts to programming, whatever those might be. So that is on the docket for kind of further discussion next week. Another thing we started talking about, we are continuing to talk about, is just the ways in which we are already, Katie and the district team are already implementing kind of additional processes to kind of fix some of the systemic issues that have led us to this point, led us to the point last year and the point this year where we have kind of a projected deficit. Katie shared that she's already started putting together kind of a write-up of, she shared some of the best practices here and at Finance Committee and at public spaces But the idea of putting something really more formally together to share with the public, to put on the website with all the other resources, just make that more clear for folks as folks are reaching out asking, what are you doing to make this more, ensure this isn't going to happen in the future. She's doing that in terms of the internal things, systems and checks and balances. I think we still have more work to do within that conversation too, and Amanda, kindly enough, kind of has started reaching out to other school committees to see if there are additional resources related to our own practices, right? And maybe this is something that goes, it's more a governance conversation, but just like what are the other things that, we could be doing, should be doing in terms of asking and supporting the district and, communicating with the public about these things to make folks understand. I think, it is more and more every day there continue to be more reports about towns, about school districts that are in worse situations than we are. North Andover just had an article come out about the potential need to close down a school in order to address budget gap within the current year. And we see Brookline has gaps even after passing an override 2 years ago. And so it is hard all around, which maybe makes us feel slightly better, but obviously doesn't solve the issue and the impact to our staff and students within the current fiscal year. But it's a problem we are still needing to work to solve. So I think that's the update, but please, anything else I missed?
Good job.
And I do appreciate you pointing out those other districts, because I think what we are doing now and going to continue to do, moving forward is making sure that we don't end up in those situations, right? Like where they talked about an override 2 years ago in Brookline, and they're in this mess now, and they do an audit and do all of those things. So I think I'm glad that we're kind of looking, I know it's a very short runway, but I'm glad we're looking at all of this right now so that we're kind of planning for the future too, instead of just getting through today, and which is what we've always done. So we really appreciate, in terms of Katie, you're kind of looking into the future in terms of years down, how does this set us up? And Peter, obviously, just, from your system standpoint, all the things that you are doing, to kind of, streamline things for us. I think this is where hopefully with all of these processes, and we talk about improving our process and how we can support you, I think this is where all the pieces come together, and we can kind of put good practices in place for the school committee to continue to do the work they do. So,
Yeah, I think also, I know you brought up the Brookline piece, and I think it's important to note the differences in our situation, and that too, I think the point you're making of my understanding of the Brookline. I don't want to cast aspersions, but is the real, more deeper financial issues around misappropriation of resources around special education funding that wasn't going to that and instead was being spent elsewhere, and students were denied services and all. So I just say, when we are, and I did it obviously just now, comparing ourselves to that, that is not our situation. We are to, I think the point you're making, we are not there. We know what the situation is with us, which is just that our expenses within particular line items were our mandated expenses we can't curb, we can't just stop, and they were greater than, we had bad budget practices, and that they were much greater than what we budgeted for.
And that's what she's actually looking at, exactly what she's setting up, which is the process.
Yes.
So that we're not taking from something else and putting it over here so that we're denying services and so on and so forth. We're budgeting accurately.
Yes.
So that we're not in that position down the road. So and so I just really appreciate that level of thinking and thoughtfulness that is going into this. So that's why, again, it's when I'm looking at this, it's what we're trying to save is not that much. It's not a huge amount. That's why it's all right, let's just go with what we need.
Is it really worth that?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the way in which it's a cost benefit analysis that the select board is needing to do, as far as what is the benefit of cutting that cost? Is it worth what you're saving?
Right.
It may not be, but you're right.
Yeah, and it's, at the end of the day, it's not just, it's more than, we're not just giving last year's, we've completely reconfigured a lot of things. So it's not just from, it's
not a rolling over.
It's not a rolling over. It's like we've looked at a lot of different things and setting us up so that we're not, seeing these huge increases next year or the year after and stuff. So again, I think that's the message there too. So it's not just, hey, this is our level service, but there's a whole component that goes with it, which is what got us to this number.
There's been so many people that have been involved in the process. We talk a lot about the work that we're doing with the principals and the central office team, our curriculum coordinators. There's just been so many people just within the school department, and people are really engaged. And I think the more that people are engaged in the budget process and the work that we're doing, they're taking accountability for it, right?
Yes.
And they're realizing the cost benefit analysis and this is what it truly means. This is what the budget is. This is kind of I am responsible for this, and so I want to make sure that I am using this money. It's kind of like an allowance when you're young, right? I want to make sure that I'm spending my money on the best possible thing. And I think that's a shift from when I first started, even just a few short months ago. The fact that people are actually talking about it. They're talking about the budget. We're talking about it in every conversation now. And that's a shift. That's an improvement that will continue. And that's going to help us. It really is. That's going to help us so much moving forward, just in the fact that having the community trust us, that this truly is, we're mindful of the fact that this is a community resource. The schools really are a community resource. So I just want to thank everyone too that has been a part of the process. I feel at times I'm definitely a broken record when I talk about the budget, but it's a lot of work. So thank you to everyone for listening to me all the time.
And I think this is where
painful,
the more, more involvement from staff on the budget, and that it's part of, because it supports everything we do, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's, again, is a great way to build community support behind it. So I think those conversations shouldn't be just you kind of working on it by yourself, but you're working on it together, and there's an understanding that comes with it, right? And appreciate you involving us in this process of figuring out and sharing these things and letting us, have this discussion and get to the point, because that's how we make a strong case for it too. Right. So.
The girls team won.
All right.
That's it for the finance report. I do have, is it on the agenda, a vote? We don't have
We don't
the vote
have
for the
them
warrant.
on here
All right.
somehow.
Sorry, Dale. Apologize.
We will make sure they're on there next week.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, so policy.
So we did not have a meeting since our last meeting. Our next meeting's not till mid-March, but I think it was the Title IX policies that were requested from the last meeting with the red line, so you could see the changes that were in there.
Yeah, they're there.
And these are the versions we've received from legal counsel and MASC regarding just the implications of the recent changes to Title IX that necessitate certain language changes in policy.
So is this, did this come from the language, the red line language? Did that come from them? Did it come from legal? Did it come from?
The red line is our previous.
I mean, the
Yeah, that
the
comes
recommendation.
MASC.
Okay.
Probably. Yeah. We also just, for your kind of knowledge about what we're doing internally, so we did talk about the policies, and I shared a brief from MASS on things that administrators need to be thinking about again, because we are reverting back with this. So if someone's been an administrator for a long time, they've gone through a number of different changes on Title IX.
Okay.
So the procedure is different than what we've been living with for the last 4 years, so it's a return.
But can you speak to the impact? Can you speak to the relationship, I guess, between the changes we have here from Title IX, which is that sex-based discrimination is no longer included, right? But in terms of what that means for us in Massachusetts, what is the...
Well, it's a federal, so it's not in Massachusetts.
No, I know, but the upshot is that you are still protected against sex-based discrimination by
schools.
state law in Massachusetts.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just you are no longer citing Title IX
Or
as...
going through the Title IX process.
Or going through that process. So I just want to make sure as we prepare to accept these changes, which we are required to accept because they are just based on what the law is, I think it's going to be, so I'm glad you're working with staff, and I think we need to make sure the community understands that the protection is not going away. The source of the protection is just sort of shifting focus, and we've always had it. Now, I don't know, not always, but we have had it in both places. Now we are fortunate to have it in our state law, even if it is not at this time in our federal law.
Yeah, and I think it's important for the community to know that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Further, and for, obviously, just folks who are advising and talking to students to know that those protections are still there. I think that's great.
And I think that's one of the things I really value about Massachusetts as a whole is like every communication we get relative to some of the federal changes that are happening, there's always, and I've shared some of that information with you all, right?
Yeah.
Relative to immigration and the other issues. There's always kind of a doubling down on what we value in the state, which I think is important and very helpful.
Do we have any other policies that outside of Title IX that protect or address sex-based bullying, harassment? Like, is that listed anywhere else, just within student code of conduct or within other? Again, given it wouldn't be a Title IX investigation, which has again very clear processes and procedures, as you're saying, Lizzie. Like, wouldn't be under that, but just knowing, is there a different policy that folks who are concerned about their protections within the school would look to, and that we would direct them to, and that
in our handbooks as well.
It's in the So it'd be dealt with less as like the legally required Title IX process, but more from the standpoint of the general school, discipline kind of investigation supports that happen for any number of reasons. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, I'm just looking right now. JICFB is bullying prevention. JICFA, hazing. As I said, our handbooks articulate a lot of this as well. So we have like more than enough direction for any kind of incident where any form of harassment or bullying. It is one of the systems areas we're working on too, in terms of formalizing documentation and processes and things like that. It kind of can be common for, principal's been around for 10 years and does that, they know what the policy is, but they do it this way. And so we're working to make sure that we are kind of like district-wide have a singular way that we're approaching that. And Danielle Wetmore is leading that work.
Yeah, it's very clearly in GICFD. Thank you.
Then can I go ahead and make the motion? Okay. Using the expedited approval process, motion is made to approve the following policies. Policy AC, non-discrimination policy, including harassment and retaliation. Policy AC-R, non-discrimination policy, including harassment and retaliation. Policy ACAB, sexual harassment.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Thank you. So we had a bullet under here on MIAA guidance update related. Is that something you have any update on?
I don't have any new updates on that.
Okay. Maybe we can sort of keep on that to make sure that we're up to date as far as how this is being addressed in the context of, again, Massachusetts, and how we as a district can then be speaking about it. As regards to, like, I remember we had a speaker come and speak to us about this a couple of meetings ago.
Put it on our agenda for next week.
Okay, that would be good. And so after that, I think we just make it to approval of minutes.
Yeah.
And we have 2 sets of minutes in our folder. So give people a minute to look over those. Any edits, changes? A couple of intense meetings to relive through the minutes. At least we're on track to end earlier tonight. Since we were only here, till 11:45 last night for town meeting.
Oh, I never heard how.
Yeah, it was late.
Good
I thought we were going to
times.
be here till 11 tonight. I was like,
I know, I'm gonna have to sit in the parking lot, so my babysitter still gets paid something.
it's a long one.
I can make a motion.
Are we ready? Okay.
Make a motion.
Go for it.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the January 22nd, 2025 Milton School Committee meeting and the February 5th, 2025 Milton School Committee meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor? Sorry. Let's forget that part.
Okay. So for next agenda, here on my phone, I can't access my calendar. I know we have our budget hearing beginning at 6:30. So 6:30 p.m. in here begins the budget hearing, which is our annual opportunity as required to hear from the community about their, about the budget. So that will happen. And then followed by our regular meeting. So
I just have a quick question on that. So if select board comes up with a number that doesn't align with our new needs-based or level service budget, do we update it for the budget hearing, or how does that work? Because it's the day after.
We're not going to have, that's kind of why I was asking before, was we're not going to have enough time.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think we can have the budget. I just don't think
I don't know if we can.
we're not going to see that. We're not going to see it if something changes until
I don't know if
thought
it
we
makes
had talked
sense.
about the next meeting.
the 19th.
for the budget hearing,
Yeah, because
Doesn't
of
make
everything
any
that's going
sense.
on.
I don't know if that's, we can, we had to post it. It had to be posted in the Milton Times. It's like a whole procedure for how you have to notice that meeting of the hearing. So like it was already posted for happening March 5th.
We have a meeting Wednesday morning, don't we? Finance.
We do.
But that's not enough time to
no,
update
Quite
whatever
honestly,
the outcome is.
it's not a totally sure thing that the select board is necessarily going to vote on their number next week. I mean, I think that's, we have an indication that is an intent, but I think I think we need to arrive at a place where we can approve our budget request. If the timeline of the select board means we have to make adjustments to it, then we'll have to do that, I guess. But the budget hearing, here's another thing. Actually, I'm thinking out loud. We can have the budget here. Can we have the budget hearing next week, even if we don't formally vote on the budget at next week's meeting? I think the main thing was that we have the budget hearing before we technically vote. So actually, let's back up and just say, why don't we'll keep our budget hearing next week? That's an important opportunity where members of the community can come speak to us about their concerns or thoughts on our budget.
Do we present the budget? How do we get that, again, how we arrived to this new level service budget? Because I think there needs to be some context, because that number has been out there, but what's different now needs to be explained before people come in and raise concerns, because I think there's a disconnect.
That's a good point, and I will just say I
guess we could use if we cross-post the finance committee meeting in the morning, we could go over the numbers present that.
Yeah.
So according to Mass General Law, because it's the budget hearing is in
It's just
accordance
something we're
to
doing. Yeah, it's required.
Mass General Law, it just says that prior to such public hearing, the committee shall make available to the public at least one copy of said proposed budget for a time period of not less than 48 hours, either at the office of the superintendent, at schools, or at a place so designated. And so we do have the level service budget and the needs-based budget. Those have been posted publicly for
Months.
I think
a period of time. And so I think ultimately, I know that the underlying detail may change and the select board may come back with a different number, but if we are hopefully at the point where we're still talking about that same overall level service budget number, then that number has been publicly posted kind of for a period of time. So I think at least the posting.
But we would probably be talking about the slightly altered.
Yes.
Kind of like the underlying
Yeah, yeah.
detail. Absolutely.
So are we presenting the budget before comments? Like, how does it, like, I don't remember anyone.
I don't
didn't
think
last time.
that's not what
Yeah, no, I was going to say, that's not what we did last
we've
year.
not done that in the past, and I don't think that's
There was
the
no comment last year,
expectation.
though.
I think
comments last year. I don't remember.
yeah, it's a
Yeah,
public.
nobody
It's an
came.
extended. It's essentially, it's an.
There just might be more
Our
this
past
year than
practice
obviously
was
it's
to have
over.
it be 15 minutes before the meeting, and I thought, given where we're at, we should make that 30 minutes before the meeting. So that's why 6:30, and that is what it is. It's extended public comment on the topic of the budget. So if people wanted to speak on public comment on other topics other than the budget, they would be welcome to do that at the regular public comment in our regular meeting.
Yeah.
This is purely on the budget, and to your point, Anna, I think the expectation is that since the materials have been shared, they're out there, people are expected who want to come to share a view, like they have done their homework, so to speak, and they kind of have the access to the information, and they're bringing us a
So
perspective.
they would be commenting on the previous versions.
Or I guess what we discussed tonight if they watched
they could.
tonight's
So
discussion.
I think that what I think might make sense, and maybe we can follow up on this, would be a communication, and maybe it's in the weekly emails that goes out or whatever, but a clear message that's included that explains this is the budget hearing, it has been posted for this date and time.
Yeah.
And again, drive people to the landing page where they can find all this information. And maybe we post there this meeting recording, which is like, if you want the latest sort of
discussion.
iteration
edits,
of where the school committee is as of February 26th, like this is, you can watch this meeting, and then you can come and share your thoughts. I think that is reasonable. And then in the course of our meeting, based on finance in the morning, and
Select board.
then whatever you all are bringing us as the follow-up to tonight's discussion, we can go from there.
Yeah. I think we're all agreeing it's a little less than ideal, but that's the situation we are finding ourselves in, given
The
how fluid.
situation is less than ideal.
Yeah, just given, I mean, it'd be great to have a more firm budget to
Well-
discuss next week, but we're not there because the situation's so fluid, and that's not not your fault. I mean, not anybody.
We're all.
We will. Hopefully, the public. I guess what I'm saying. Hopefully, that is understandable, and that they are coming in with that understanding of like we are in a fluid situation, trying to do what we can.
Yep.
Is there a response, or is it just comments?
My
People have, is it, so in the same vein that we don't respond to public comment here, is it?
I will double check to make sure that I have the proper language to frame the opening of the hearing. My recollection is that it's not a discussion so much as it's our opportunity to hear from people to then incorporate feedback into our discussion, which we will then roll right into in the meeting.
Yeah, incorporate comment within the discussion.
Exactly. So to the extent questions, concerns are raised, we will have the opportunity to address those as we then discuss the budget from there, is my understanding.
That's typically how it's been in my experience as well.
As for other next meeting agenda items, I mean, clearly this is, again, going to be the main one. And we're going to work to develop the agenda for next week. So we'll just see what else there needs to be, but yes.
This isn't quite a next week agenda item, but I think we talked prior to the break about, I mentioned this to you off right before, but like about having scheduling additional public sessions forums.
Yep.
And we were trying to get one before the break, but like knowing that was 5 o'clock, it was the best we were going to be able to do before everybody left, but trying to schedule more of those.
I think we should, and I think it would be beneficial in this place we find ourselves, where we're very close to, I think my thought is next week's focus is this hearing, because that is an opportunity unto itself. And in past years, we've not had much attendance at that. You know, we definitely encourage people to come to that. Every district has to have it. You know, we invite people to come, share their thoughts online or in person. And then I think from there, when we have the clarity, you know, I think we should definitely schedule another sort of forum. And we had talked about having an online option for people, in addition, for where there is an opportunity for more of the back and forth beyond the hybrid budget hearing opportunity. So yeah, I mean, do other people agree with that? That like we kind of get through next week, and then schedule something additional from there.
Yeah, I think to schedule additional ones, I think we need to be we need to know more, right? We're kind of in limbo right now, so we're less in flux. It'll create probably more confusion. So I think once we have a concrete idea, then we can advocate for that.
Then we're just
answer that. Yes. But I think to do it any sooner, once we have that and had Katie,
we're very close,
and the team has had time to really look at those, what the impacts are, and all of those things. I think because if people are coming at that point, they want to know more. And then I think also at that time, you know, really emphasizing the processes that, you know, you're putting in place. I think that message should be, you know, and kind of just saying, like, not just so that they can see it, like visually, like this is what, you know, and maybe it's even a little chart or, you know, something where they can say, okay, this is what you're putting in place going forward.
Yeah.
You know, and I think those things are really important to kind of, you know, build trust and all of those things, even with the broader community in our district as well. So.
Yep. I'll make sure to flag once the agenda is developed before it's posted. I'll just ping you guys so that since we haven't talked about other items, if there are other things, you'll tell me that you need to add them. But it's just next week, so I don't think we even have a lot of other like subcommittee activity taking place anyway. So
a little bit of
2 finance meetings.
Okay, great.
And they're all cross-posted, right?
They are cross-posted.
And in person.
And in person.
Okay. Yep, great. Okay. So with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor? Okay, great. Thanks, everybody.